Formula One drivers have raised concerns over the possible long-term effects of the porpoising many of them are suffering in their cars this year. 8 races into the season, several teams are still experiencing the phenomenon. It has arisen due to the different approaches they have taken to the new technical regulations introduced for 2022, which allowed teams to generate more downforce using their cars' floors. The severity of the problem varies from team to team. Some largely avoid it, others encounter it but are still able to race competitively, while others find it restricts their performance. The severity of the porpoising also differs from track to track. Baku's long and bumpy straights have made the problem especially severe for some teams. Mick Schumacher even suffered a water leak, which caused a stoppage during first practice. Carlos Sainz Jr. said he suffered a lot with this in his Ferrari, while teammate Charles Leclerc did not. "I had, for some reason, a car or a floor that was porpoising and bottoming a lot more than the other car with the same setup," said Sainz. "It was for some reason very, very painful, and there was a bit of chaos in the car going on. But I saw there's also others struggling around this track." Drivers raised concerns over the effects porpoising is having on them during a meeting with the FIA F1 race director Nils Wittich. "It got to a point where, in the driver's briefing, we all looked at each other and said, we need to do something," Sainz recounted. "Because it's okay one race, but can we do 10 more years like this? I doubt it. We kindly asked the FIA to look into it, to don't, let's say, listen to the teams too much, and listen to us instead. That we were saying that it's getting to a point where we are struggling, all of us, to handle this." Along with the aerodynamic changes to the cars, teams were also required to simplify their suspension systems this year. Sainz suggested relaxing this rule as a means of allowing teams to control the porpoising. "We need something smarter on the suspension, or in the way the cars are being run, where the FIA controls a bit better the possibility of the teams to run that stiff, that hard, that kind of ride that you see on the straights," he said. "I'm pretty sure that if you ask 2 or 3 engineers, they will know the answer and what can be done to limit this and regulate it. But we just need the FIA to act as soon as possible, because if not, it's going to start accumulating." I don't know if you can call it a danger, but you can say, is it necessary for Formula One to have 20 drivers at the end of each race with back issues? Sainz added. "My personal opinion is that with the technology that there is nowadays, why do we need to carry this painful situation into our careers when you can put up a pretty easy solution to it? So it's more of a matter of, is it really worth it? Is it necessary when there is possibly a very easy solution to put in place? I don't think so. It's not necessary, and we should all, teams included, think about the driver's health." Race fans understands a change to the 2022 rules was discussed last year, which would have prevented teams running their cars as low as they are doing in order to prevent the porpoising which has occurred. However, the change was not supported by enough teams to be approved. George Russell, who is also a director in the Grand Prix Drivers Association, warned yesterday it is just a matter of time before we see a major incident due to the porpoising. Russell's boss, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff, said that the current situation was not straightforward, and he felt it was important to understand why some cars were suffering worse than others. "I think we've seen cars that don't have the issue and then others who have it even worse, clearly," he said. "I can talk for our 2 drivers. They are having issues, and it goes to a point that even a physio can't fix sometimes. So we need to see how that develops and understand why it's much tougher in some cars than in others." Fernando Alonso, the most experienced driver on the grid, described the ride in the current cars as the worst of the last 20 years. "I think it's a combination," he continued. "This track has been very bumpy on the straights, also with the old cars, so this year it's exaggerated. I think there's going to come a few tracks like Jeddah that it was very smooth, or Australia, and no one is complaining. A rules change is going to be very difficult to agree for all the teams," said Alonso. "But yeah, I wish they'd do something for the young boys. For me, it's okay for a few more years." Russell's teammate Lewis Hamilton told his race engineer Peter Bonington, "My back's killing me," during his long-run simulation on Friday due to the porpoising and bottoming they suffered. He believes the problem is becoming a safety thing for sure. "Today, it's bottoming through corners where you're doing 180 miles an hour and big bottoming, and there's not really a lot we can do to stop it. We can't have this for 4 years of this car, so I think they need to work on it. I think all the drivers have have spoken about it. There were a lot of moments where I didn't know whether I was going to make it and if I was going to be able to keep the car on track, said Hamilton after the race. That was the most painful and toughest race I have experienced. I was just holding and biting down on my teeth due to the pain. The adrenaline helped, but I cannot express the pain that you experience, particularly on the straight here. I was just praying for it to end. And confirming the extent of the pain following the race, Hamilton took to Instagram to deliver a message to his followers. Seeing online that a lot of people are concerned about me with how awful it looked out there, he wrote, "It means so much that so many of you are sending love. I'll be honest, it looks terrible and feels 100 times worse. Definitely some recovering and hard work with the team to do before Montreal to overcome this hurdle. Feeling better already though, and motivated to keep pushing. See you next week." He added an update the following morning, however, stating in his Instagram story, "Yesterday was tough and had some trouble sleeping, but have woke up feeling positive today. Back is a little sore and bruised, but nothing serious thankfully. I've had acupuncture and physio with Ange, and I'm on the way to my team to work with them on improving. We have to keep fighting. No time like the present to pull together, and we will. I'll be there this weekend. Wouldn't miss it for the world." Hamilton, 7-time world champion, finished 4th after starting 7th on the grid, but there appeared a real danger that he would be unable to compete in Canada next weekend. "He is really bad," said his team boss Toto Wolff after the race. "You can see this is not muscular anymore. It goes properly into the spine and it can have some consequences. The solution could be to have someone on reserve, which we anyway have at every race." Lando Norris has claimed Mercedes could easily get on top of their bouncing issues with a simple fix. The McLaren star has said the team could put a much stiffer floor on Lewis Hamilton and George Russell's car, as well as raise the ride height. However, Norris stressed the team obviously don't want to lose performance by making the changes. The Briton even claimed teams should be looking at fixing the issue themselves after a series of calls for rule changes. Speaking to F1 TV's post-race show, he said, "It's what you have to deal with. It's the trade of trying to gain performance. We can quite easily go lower, gain performance, but have more porpoising. But we just think where we are is at the correct amount. I'm sure the Mercedes can have a much stiffer floor and raise the ride height, and it would be much nicer for them. But they obviously just don't want to lose performance. I don't think it's anything to complain about. It's just people need to find a way of fixing it themselves." Daniel Ricciardo, who produced an improved performance to finish 8th ahead of McLaren teammate Lando Norris, expressed his sympathy for the Mercedes drivers after the race. Despite struggling for pace at times this season, McLaren has been one of the teams least affected by the bouncing or porpoising, but the bumpy Baku circuit saw the Australians suffer. "I feel like, when pro basketball players bounce the ball really low, that's what I felt like someone was doing in my helmet," he told Sky Sports F1. "It got worse and worse, and I sympathise with everyone that's had it now. It's bad. I genuinely feel rattled. I'm definitely going to help out when people talk about it. I know George has been vocal about it, that it's not sustainable. It's not good for our general health and well-being. It's not normal, the high-frequency load that we get. I'm shaken, probably because it's the first time I've truly felt what some others feel. It definitely felt bad." McLaren team principal Andreas Seidel expects the drivers' concerns will be discussed by the FIA. "I think it's a fair point that drivers mention," he said. "I'm sure it will be discussed and followed up in the Technical Advisory Committee, like it has been done at the beginning of the season when these stakes have been introduced. The severity you see on some cars, it's brutal on the drivers," he added. "That's why it's a fair point and a good point to bring forward to the Technical Advisory Committee and see if it makes sense to address it. At the same time, right now, every team knows also how to stop it immediately. But because of the nature of everyone being within competition, it makes sense to look into it as a whole group and the best interests of the sport moving forward." With the Canadian Grand Prix quickly following next, the issue could be on the agenda once more in Montreal. After that, there is a slightly longer gap before Formula One arrives in Great Britain and Silverstone hosts the British Grand Prix from July the 1st to the 3rd.